The delivery that changed everything. Sarah Evans never expected her life to change over a simple food delivery. She had been working for Fast Track Delivery, pedaling through the city's chaotic streets every day, weaving through traffic, dodging pedestrians, and racing against time to deliver orders before customers started complaining. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't exciting, but it paid the bills, barely. And today was supposed to be just another exhausting shift. The final delivery of the day. Sarah wiped the sweat from her forehead as she checked the last delivery on her list. Smith & Associates, floor 28. Her stomach twisted slightly. Smith & Associates wasn't just any company. It was one of the most prestigious law firms in the city, specializing in high-stakes corporate litigation. The kind of place where lawyers charged more per hour than she made in a week. The kind of place where someone like her didn't belong. But a delivery was a delivery. She gripped the bag tightly, adjusted her helmet, and pushed open the grand glass doors of the building. The elevator showdown. The lobby screamed wealth. Polished marble floors, towering glass windows, and a front desk receptionist who looked like she belonged on a fashion magazine cover. Sarah walked briskly past the murmuring suits and headed straight for the elevators. Just as the doors were about to close, a group of sharply dressed lawyers rushed in, their expensive cologne filling the air as they argued about some legal case. Sarah quickly slipped in behind them, just in time. But then, at the very last second, another man stepped in. The elevator let out a loud, shrill beep. Overweight limit. A murmur spread among the lawyers as one of them checked the screen. "We've hit the weight limit," one of them muttered. The group exchanged awkward glances. It was clear what they were thinking. Sarah's stomach dropped. Sure enough, one of them turned to her. "Someone needs to step out," the lawyer said, looking directly at Sarah. She blinked. Okay, who was the last one to get in? The group hesitated, then turned their heads toward the tall, well-dressed man standing near the back. His navy blue suit looked like it had been tailored specifically for him. His hair was styled to perfection, and his entire posture screamed, "I'm important." The man raised an eyebrow, as if surprised he was being called out. "Me?" Sarah crossed her arms. "Yeah, you were the last one in. Basic elevator etiquette. Last in, first out." A lawyer coughed awkwardly. She wasn't wrong. But instead of stepping out, the man smirked. "I'm not leaving. I need to get upstairs." Sarah mirrored his stance. "Great, so do I, and my delivery is just as important as your meeting." The lawyers shifted uncomfortably, clearly not used to seeing someone challenge this man. One of them sighed. "Miss, just take the next one. It's only a few minutes." Sarah stood her ground. "A few minutes could cost me my delivery time. Why should I be the one to leave and not him?" She gestured toward the man in the suit. Another awkward pause. Then one of the lawyers finally caved and stepped out. "There, now stop arguing," he muttered. Sarah shot a triumphant glance at Mr. Fancy Suit as the doors closed. The reveal. The elevator hummed with tension as it climbed. Sarah could feel the man's gaze on her, but she refused to acknowledge him. Then one of the lawyers cleared his throat and spoke hesitantly. "You do realize who you were just arguing with, right?" Sarah frowned. "No. Should I?" The lawyer exchanged a knowing glance with the others before turning back to her. "That's Nicholas Smith, CEO of Smith & Associates." Sarah's heart stopped for a second. Her eyes flicked to the man beside her. CEO. She had just gone toe-to-toe with the boss of the entire company, the man who probably signed million-dollar contracts before breakfast. The realization made her stomach tighten. But instead of looking offended, Nicholas smiled. "You've got guts," he said simply. Sarah lifted her chin. "I've got a delivery to make, and I have a company to run." "Congratulations. That doesn't mean you get special treatment in an elevator." Nicholas chuckled. The elevator doors dinged open on the 28th floor, and the lawyers quickly scattered, eager to escape the tension. Sarah stepped out, grateful that her stop was just down the hall. She checked the delivery ticket. Her customer's name was Nicholas Smith. Her stomach sank. No, this has to be a mistake. But it wasn't. The awkward delivery. Taking a deep breath, Sarah knocked on the large glass office door. "Come in." She pushed it open and stepped inside. Nicholas was already seated at his massive mahogany desk, flipping through some legal documents. When he looked up and saw her, his eyebrows lifted in genuine surprise. "You again?" Sarah forced a smile so stiff it could have been legally considered fraudulent. "Yep. Life's little ironies." She strode over to his desk and placed the bag down, maybe a little harder than necessary. "Here's your food, Mr. CEO who can't wait for an elevator." Nicholas held back a laugh. "Looks like we were meant to cross paths more than once today." Sarah crossed her arms. "Or maybe I've been cursed by the god of bad luck." Nicholas leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You're a great speaker. Have you ever thought about doing something other than food delivery?" Sarah narrowed her eyes. "Why does everyone keep saying that?" "Because you're quick-witted, sharp, and incredibly bold. That's rare." She scoffed. "I studied law for a bit, but I had to drop out." Nicholas's interest peaked. "Why?" Sarah's gaze flickered away. "Personal reasons. Look, if you're about to give me some motivational speech, I'll pass." Nicholas smirked. "Not at all." He grabbed a sheet of paper, scribbled something down, and slid it across the desk toward her. "This is a mock case. An employee was fired without cause. How can they fight it?" Sarah frowned. "Seriously, you're testing me now?" "I'm curious." Sarah rolled her eyes but couldn't resist the challenge. She picked up the paper and scanned it. "Depends on the contract and length of service. If the termination was without prior notice, they may be entitled to compensation under labor law. If there's a specific clause in the contract, they could claim a breach of agreement." Nicholas's eyes gleamed with intrigue. "You have talent." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "Was that a test?" "It was. And you passed." She huffed. "Great. Can I go now?" Before she could turn, Nicholas grabbed her insulated food bag. "If you want a better job than delivering food, come to my office tomorrow. Let's talk." Sarah stared at him. "Are you offering me a job?" Nicholas shrugged. "I'm offering you a chance. What you do with it is up to you." She hesitated, then grabbed his business card off the desk. "We'll see." As she walked out, Nicholas watched her go, a curious smile playing on his lips. That girl wasn't ordinary, and he wanted to find out exactly what she was capable of. A chance she never expected. Sarah Evans sat on her small, second-hand couch, Nicholas Smith's business card burning a hole in her palm. She had delivered thousands of meals before. None of them had ever come with a job offer. Her roommate, Mia, sat cross-legged on the floor, munching on popcorn and scrolling through her phone. She peeked over and squinted at the card in Sarah's hand. "So let me get this straight." Mia licked salt from her fingers. "You argued with the CEO of a billion-dollar law firm in an elevator, delivered his food, and now he wants to hire you." Sarah sighed. "Pretty much." Mia snorted. "This sounds like the plot of a bad rom-com." Sarah tossed the card onto the coffee table. "It's not like that." "Oh, sure it isn't." Mia smirked. "So, are you going?" That was the question, wasn't it? Sarah had worked too hard for too long to believe in fairy tale opportunities. She had dreamed of being a lawyer once, of arguing cases, standing in a courtroom, making a real difference. But dreams didn't pay the bills. Reality was late rent, grocery budgets, and sore legs from riding a bike all day. Nicholas Smith was a stranger. A powerful, ridiculously confident stranger who could probably snap his fingers and have her replaced in an instant. So why did he care? Why did he want her at his office? And why was she actually considering it? Mia nudged her. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" Sarah groaned, throwing her head back. I hate that I am. Mia grinned. Then you should go. Worst case, you hate it and leave. Best case. She wiggled her eyebrows. Sarah grabbed a pillow and threw it at her face. Not a rom-com. Mia's muffled laughter was all the response she got. Walking into the lion's den. The next morning, Sarah found herself standing in front of Smith and Associates again. Only this time, she wasn't wearing her fast-track uniform. She had thrown together the best, I'm totally professional outfit she could afford. A light blue blouse, black slacks, and a pair of flats that looked nice, but would probably murder her feet by noon. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the glass doors. The receptionist, the same one from yesterday, raised an eyebrow but smiled. No delivery bag today. Sarah forced a chuckle. Not today. The receptionist picked up the phone. Mr. Smith, your guest has arrived. Guest. That sounded weird. You can go up. Sarah steeled herself and stepped into the elevator. This time, no one told her to leave. When the doors opened on the 28th floor, Nicholas Smith was already waiting for her. Good morning, Ms. Evans. His suit was as sharp as ever, his hair perfectly styled, but there was a hint of amusement in his expression. You actually came. Sarah crossed her arms. Wasn't planning to, but curiosity got the better of me. Nicholas grinned. I respect that. He led her through the office, passing lawyers who were whispering and sneaking glances. Sarah pretended not to notice. They entered his office and Nicholas gestured for her to sit across from him. All right, let's get to it. Sarah leaned back. To what? You never actually told me what this job is. Nicholas slid a file across the desk. Your first challenge. Sarah picked it up, flipping through the pages. Her brows furrowed. This is a real contract. Yes. And you want me to review it. Sarah narrowed her eyes. This still feels like a test. Nicholas smirked. Of course it is, but that's how you'll learn. Proving herself. Sarah exhaled and focused on the contract. 3 minutes in, she was already marking up clauses. Nicholas watched, hiding his amusement. Find anything? He asked casually. Sarah tapped a section with her pen. This clause says that if the contractor fails to meet the deadline, the penalty fee will be determined at their discretion. And that basically gives them the right to charge whatever they want. It's vague and legally risky. Nicholas tilted his head. Is it illegal? Sarah smirked. No, but it's unethical. And any good lawyer could challenge it. Nicholas chuckled. I like the way you think. Sarah set down the pen and crossed her arms. So, did I pass your little test? Nicholas stood and extended his hand. If you accept the job, this will be your daily routine. Sarah hesitated for exactly 2 seconds before shaking his hand. Fine, but no coffee fetching. Nicholas smirked. Noted. Welcome to the team. Sarah was introduced to the office as Nicholas's new assistant. The murmur started immediately. Is that the girl from the elevator? Yeah, he actually hired her. But she was a delivery girl. Sarah rolled her eyes. Great, my nickname is already set. Lena, Nicholas's secretary, smiled sympathetically. Don't worry, they'll forget in a few weeks. Sarah snorted, or remember forever. Lena laughed. Come on, I'll show you where you'll be working. Ruffling feathers. Sarah quickly realized not everyone was happy with her presence. Especially Hyder Reynolds, one of the firm's top attorneys. He had been watching her with suspicion since she arrived. At lunch, he finally decided to confront her. You know you don't deserve to be here, right? Sarah raised an eyebrow. Oh, and who decides that? You? Hyder scoffed. I studied for years to be here. You were delivering food last week. Sarah smiled sweetly. And yet Nicholas hired me. What does that say about you? Hyder's face reddened. Let's see how long you last. Sarah tilted her head. "If you want to bet, I'm in." At that moment, Nicholas appeared. "If you're done with this ego contest, we have a client waiting." Sarah flashed a victorious smirk and followed him. Hyder stayed behind, clearly frustrated. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. A natural talent. Their first client meeting came sooner than expected. Nicholas handed Sarah a folder as they walked. "We have a meeting with an important client in 10 minutes. Sarah's eyes widened. "Wait, I'm going to a meeting. If you want to learn, you need to see how things work in practice." Sarah straightened her posture. When they entered the conference room, a middle-aged man sat at the table. He looked at Nicholas, then at Sarah, frowning. "Who is this?" Nicholas sat down. "My assistant, Sarah Evans." The man narrowed his eyes. "Assistant? I was expecting someone more experienced." Sarah smiled coolly. "Funny. I was expecting more polite clients." Nicholas suppressed a laugh. The man blinked, then snorted. "All right, let's see what you can do." Sarah picked up the contract. She had no law degree, no formal training. But she had something more valuable: instincts, sharpness, and a hunger to prove herself. And she wasn't about to waste this chance. The unexpected prodigy. Sarah Evans sat at the conference table, her hands lightly gripping the contract in front of her. The air in the room felt heavier than it should have. Across from her, Mr. Martinez, a well-dressed middle-aged businessman, observed her with thinly veiled skepticism. Beside her, Nicholas Smith, the CEO of Smith & Associates, sat back in his chair, his hands folded in front of him, watching with quiet amusement. Sarah knew exactly what was happening. She had seen it in every restaurant where the customers treated her like she was invisible. She had heard it in every job interview where she wasn't taken seriously because of where she came from. Now, Mr. Martinez was doing the same thing. He saw a young woman in an office where she didn't seem to belong, sitting in a meeting she had no business being in. And Sarah. She was about to prove him very, very wrong. The first challenge. "All right, Ms. Evans," Mr. Martinez finally said, his fingers drumming on the table. "Since Nicholas is so confident in you, let's see what you've got." He slid a document across the table. "Tell me what's wrong with this contract." Sarah took the paper, not hesitating for even a second. She had done this before, not in a boardroom, not with million-dollar contracts, but in her old law classes, back when she had still believed she could be a lawyer. Her brain switched gears instantly. She read fast, but with precision, her eyes scanning every line, looking for loopholes, inconsistencies, and legal traps hidden in plain sight. The room was silent except for the tick of the wall clock. Finally, Sarah set the paper down and leaned back in her chair. "This contract is designed to fail." Nicholas raised an eyebrow. "Go on." Sarah tapped the page. "The termination clause is too vague. If your client signs this, they'll have no real protection against sudden contract cancellation. That means the other party can back out whenever they want without penalty." Mr. Martinez frowned but didn't interrupt. Sarah flipped the page. "This non-compete clause, it's way too restrictive. Your client wouldn't be able to work in the industry for 5 years. That's a death sentence for their career." She turned to another section. "And this arbitration clause, it's written in a way that forces disputes to go through an arbitrator chosen by the opposing party. That means if something goes wrong, your client will always be at a disadvantage." She pushed the document back toward him, crossing her arms. "If I were your lawyer, I'd never let you sign this." Nicholas smirked, amused. Mr. Martinez, however, looked stunned. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, slowly, he turned to Nicholas. "She's not a lawyer." Nicholas chuckled. "Not yet." Sarah narrowed her eyes at him. "Don't get any ideas." Mr. Martinez exhaled and shook his head, clearly impressed. "I was expecting some generic advice, but you actually know what you're talking about." Sarah shrugged. That's what you get when you ask me to read something. If there's a problem, I'll find it. The businessman chuckled. Well, that's exactly what I need. Nicholas, I think we have a deal. And he turned to Sarah. If you ever decide to become a lawyer, call me first. Sarah smirked. I'll keep that in mind. Nicholas stood up, extending a hand to Mr. Martinez. We'll have the revised contract ready by the end of the week. Mr. Martinez shook his hand and gave Sarah one last approving nod before walking out of the office. As soon as the door closed, Sarah let out a deep breath and leaned back in her chair. Okay, what the hell was that? Nicholas grinned. That, Ms. Evans, was you proving every single person in this office wrong. Earning her place. By the time Sarah returned to her desk, the office was buzzing. She could hear whispers from different departments. Did you hear? The new assistant just tore apart Martinez's contract. The delivery girl. No way. No, seriously. She found 3 major flaws before the senior attorneys even looked at it. Smith actually let her in on a client meeting. Yeah. And she crushed it. Sarah tried not to let it get to her, but she couldn't help but feel a tiny bit smug. She had spent her whole life fighting to be taken seriously. Now, she had walked into one of the most prestigious law firms in the city and made an impact on her first day. But not everyone was impressed. At lunch, Hyder Reynolds, the senior attorney who had been eyeing her suspiciously since she arrived, finally approached her desk. You think you're special, don't you? Sarah looked up from her notes. Excuse me. Hyder crossed his arms. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you don't belong here. You're not a lawyer. You didn't earn this position. You just got lucky. Sarah's jaw tightened. She had heard words like that before. From professors who thought she wasn't serious about law school. From hiring managers who took one look at her resume and dismissed her. From people who assumed she wasn't worth their time. She stood up, meeting Hyder's gaze head-on. If I were you, I'd be more worried about the fact that I caught things in that contract that you didn't. Hyder's face reddened. Sarah smirked. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do. She sat back down, ignoring him completely. Hyder glared at her for a moment longer before storming off. From the doorway, Nicholas leaned against the frame, watching with a knowing smile. You enjoy making enemies, don't you? Sarah shrugged. I'm just here to do my job. Nicholas chuckled. Then keep doing it, Evans, because something tells me you're only getting started. Sarah smiled to herself as she turned back to her desk. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she belonged. More than just a job. Sarah Evans had never planned to work at a law firm. She had never expected to sit in high-stakes client meetings, tear apart legal contracts, or go head-to-head with arrogant attorneys who doubted her. But somehow, in just a few weeks, she had gone from a food delivery driver to one of the most talked-about employees at Smith & Associates. A reputation earned, not given. Sarah's name was no longer whispered with skepticism. It was spoken with curiosity and even respect. Clients requested her opinion. Senior lawyers begrudgingly asked for her input. Even Hyder Reynolds, the attorney who had tried to intimidate her on her first day, had stopped giving her attitude, especially after she found a loophole in one of his contracts that would have cost the firm millions. Evans, he muttered one morning, dropping a folder on her desk. Since you're so good at catching mistakes, check this one. Sarah smirked as she picked up the file. Happy to help, Hyder. Nicholas had been watching all of it unfold, and he was more than pleased. You've turned my firm upside down, he said one afternoon as they sat across from each other in his office. Sarah leaned back in her chair, grinning. Wasn't that the point? Nicholas chuckled. It was. And yet, I think you've exceeded even my expectations. Sarah tilted her head. You had expectations. Of course, Nicholas said, folding his hands together. I knew you were sharp from the moment we argued in that elevator. Sarah rolled her eyes. Still not over that, huh? Never. They both laughed, and for a brief moment, It didn't feel like boss and employee. It felt like something more. A question that changed everything. A month into the job, Nicholas called Sarah into his office again. But this time, his expression was different. It wasn't just amusement or curiosity. It was something deeper. "Sit down, Evans." Sarah sat, her heart beating just a little faster than usual. Nicholas took a deep breath before speaking. "Why did you leave law school?" Sarah froze. She hadn't expected that question. Her fingers instinctively curled into fists on her lap. "Why does it matter?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. Nicholas studied her carefully. "Because you belong in this world, and I need to understand why you walked away from it." Sarah hesitated. It wasn't something she liked to talk about. But for some reason, looking into Nicholas's steady blue eyes, she felt safe enough to be honest. She exhaled slowly. "I couldn't afford it." Nicholas's expression didn't change, but his grip on his pen tightened slightly. "I worked 3 jobs just to cover tuition," she continued. "And even then, it wasn't enough. Scholarships only covered so much. Loans would have buried me for decades, so I left." She gave a small shrug, trying to seem unbothered. It wasn't a sob story. It was just reality. Nicholas leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk. "And do you regret it?" Sarah hesitated. Then, finally, she nodded. "Every day." Nicholas was silent for a moment. Then, he picked up a folder from his desk and slid it across to her. Sarah frowned, picking it up. Her breath caught when she saw what it was. "This is an application for law school," Nicholas finished. Sarah blinked rapidly, struggling to process what she was seeing. Nicholas's voice softened. "I know you didn't have the means to finish what you started, but now you do." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages. It wasn't just an application. It was a full sponsorship package, tuition, books, expenses covered by Smith and Associates. She looked up at Nicholas, disbelief clear in her eyes. You're offering to invest in you," Nicholas corrected. Sarah stared at him. "Why?" Nicholas smiled. "Because I believe in you, Evans, and because this world needs someone like you." Sarah felt her throat tighten. She had spent so long believing the door was closed forever. And now, here it was, open, waiting, possible. She could go back. She could finish what she started. The answer. Sarah took a deep breath, then slowly set the folder back on the desk. Nicholas raised an eyebrow. "You're saying no." Sarah grinned. "I'm saying, I'll think about it." Nicholas chuckled, shaking his head. "You never make anything easy, do you? Where's the fun in that?" Their eyes met, and for a moment, the office around them faded away. There was something there, something neither of them was quite ready to name. But they both felt it. And for now, that was enough. 1 year later, Sarah Evans walked confidently into the main courtroom of the city courthouse. But this time, she wasn't delivering food. She was carrying a legal brief. She wasn't wearing a delivery uniform. She was wearing a law student's badge. And Nicholas Smith. He was sitting in the audience, watching with pride. Sarah stood tall, took a deep breath, and spoke her first words in a courtroom. "Your Honor, I'm here on behalf of my client." She had finally made it. And this was only the beginning. Sometimes the right people see something in us before we see it in ourselves. And sometimes all it takes is one chance to change everything. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.